Hello and welcome to the Power of Passive Investing webinar series. We have a comeback guest today, Fred, not just because Fred has an intense sense of humor, but also because he's extremely intelligent and he writes for Forbes and has a lot to share with our audience. So without further ado, Fred, welcome. Great to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Of
Feels like I
course.
was here yesterday, but I know it was probably months ago.
Yeah, it was a month ago. That's true. Just do us a favor, give a quick introduction to our audience about yourself.
Sure.
I know you gave an extensive one in the past, but just tell us briefly in kind of 2-minute overview
Yeah,
who you
sure.
are.
So I used to be a regular financial advisor, and for 22 years, for 20 years, I've changed what we do. We focus on alternative investments, which is how you and I got to talk. And then about 5 years ago, I trademarked a retainer-based planning process so that people that have a lot of moving parts but not a lot of investable assets can still have an advisor that can give them advice on everything. So we call that milestone clarification process. And as proud as I am of the trademark and of the idea, for 2 years nothing happened. And now we're in 30 states. Now it's starting to catch fire. People who, don't want to just bring over investable assets because their money is better made in probably real estate or their business, or they're a highly paid professional that have a CEO, that have a big 401k. They have no one to work with because they don't have investable assets. We fill that niche. It's a quarterly retainer, no obligation to do it more than the quarter. We don't obligate someone to stay with us for 5 years. But once they're a retainer client, any sentence with a dollar sign and a question mark comes to us and our team. And we're all salary, so we're not looking to shove products. And so that's those two things, both the advice on the one hand and then the access to alternative investments. Those two things are enough to keep us busy, and that's our lane. We'll stay there. Low cost equity exposure, we'll recommend you go to a Vanguard or a Fidelity. We'll put it where it needs to be, even if it's not with us, which is the right thing to do. But it's refreshing, and most clients don't get that answer of, well, don't give it to me, go over here, and that's better for you. So then that snowballs and gives us referrals. And as life's a contact sport, and we just do our job and do our job well, and be honest with everybody, and help everybody, even if it's not helping us. And that's changed the ball game for us.
Awesome. Thank you for that introduction, Fred. And I will add from my personal experience, folks, Fred is a great networker, but he doesn't just do it for fun. He does it because he truly does want to help other people and offer value. And I've personally experienced that myself. So I highly encourage you to at least reach out and have a conversation with Fred. And it's very easy to find him. And we'll ask Fred at the end of the show to again provide his contact information so you can do it yourself and directly reach out to him. So let's dive right in, Fred. We kind of talked about the products you offer and the all in non-traditional stuff. Now that we're wrapping up 2024 and the election is behind us, what's on mind of our community and many other investors in general is what should we expect in 2025? And while I know you're not an Nostradamus, neither am I, but in terms of the crystal ball that you have, what do you expect from your standpoint, knowing what you know about the products you offer, the real estate, the alternatives, and so forth? What do you think 25 should bring us?
I think it should be good. I think there is a focus on debt, both at the government level and pretty much corporate level, that is overdue. The bigger you drink, the bigger the hangover. And we have had so much government spending. And keeping politics aside, was it to make things look good for? I don't know. I just know that there's way more money being spent wastefully, frankly. And we're seeing the pendulum, and I think we all kind of felt it, regardless of which side. We know it's the pendulum swung very far in one direction. And I think the election results kind of are showing that no one wants to be on either side. Everyone just wants the middle. If the government can get smaller and be more efficient, I think that's awesome. The one thing that I think we need to really take a look at is Argentina, much smaller than us, but not small. Just started this process sooner, and you can see results in real time. And I think that's the other thing is hypothetical results or hypothetical things. We're going to start to see real stuff. And so hopefully we'll see real cost cutting. There should be some, there's going to be people that the world they like is the world the way it is now, and that's not the rest of us. And we're never going to be at the table, I don't think, where where they run the world, but the rest of us just want to, do a good job, pay less in taxes, have more for our families. So we're counting on, and what we're seeing already is a little bit of a animal spirit back to the way it's supposed to be. Capitalism shouldn't be a bad word. Um, Debt shouldn't be, overly used. And if you look at the corporate numbers and compare it to a family household, we already would have been bankrupt. But because we are the USA, but there's also headwinds. Like if people don't use the dollar, we're in a hard place. So I think it could not have the reality check could not have happened sooner. So from an investment standpoint, we're coming out of cash. We're going into not just the market because the market, but the underlying, companies. And obviously AI is a big buzzword, but there's so many tech companies that didn't make it through the tech bubble. But there are big players. I think Tesla is still starting to get recognized as more than just a car manufacturer. I have a Tesla. I love it. And I think there's also a little bit of a pushback to just reality and just common sense. I literally had a client text me, "Are you going to get rid of your Tesla?" And I didn't know what she even meant by it. So I went, I paid, I upgraded to my X, I got Grok now. I'm like, why would someone, and it was honest, even though it's Elon Musk, like, oh, because of and so she was, and I love her, by the way. She was making a political statement because of Elon. And I just like the car. And then and it kind of died there. I didn't push back. The interesting thing was she drives a Mercedes. So if she's going to push the conversation very far, I can remind her the lineage of, and then, and so we're seeing a lot more open conversation, little things. I went to the restaurant today and the waitress said, "Merry Christmas." I'm like, wow, I haven't heard that in so long. So not that that's investing, but I think you're going to see a lot more just getting back to more regular stuff, not right or wrong, but just more regular stuff, and love everybody and don't hate someone if they don't think like you. And I think from an investment standpoint, we're a little bit bullish now because the noise is going away, if that makes sense.
It
Um,
does.
and it's not, and so we're still bullish on private equity. I still think in aggregate, any kind of roll-up strategy will do well. There's still ways to and places to create value for small projects. And there's three different strategies that one is in the quick service restaurant side that we talked about offline. Another
Mhm.
one's in the oil and gas, and these aren't tax credit or tax income offsets. These are just buying smaller parcels and rolling them up and adding derricks to them so that you can increase the ROI and then sell them to a big player. So we
Sure.
see that in real estate, we see that in oil and gas, we see that in private equity does it all the time. And then we
Yep.
also see that in something more specific like quick service restaurants. So that doesn't matter, like doing those strategies, if done right, doesn't matter what the stock market does, doesn't matter who's at the White House. It sometimes who's in the White House helps, but it doesn't matter if you can create A, B, and C and put them together and add value so that D is a much bigger number, and you're building it something so that someone who's a huge company just has money to write the check for and doesn't have the time or expertise to do the work to fix it. There's a lot of companies out there that they take these smaller things, make them bigger, make them better by adding money to them, and then sell the turnkey business to the big deal, the big companies we know that are out there. Um, we're seeing more of that coming online, and we're seeing some of the legacy versions of this going full cycle at very good returns. And so we're not betting on the market. I think the debt at the government, at the corporate, and at the local, at the personal level needs to be addressed. And I think it's starting to be at the government. I think corporations, obviously, interest rates go up, and now you realize that there's a real holding cost to debt, not just the 1-2% it used to be back when things were cheaper. So I
Yep.
think hopefully, if we can start to right size our debt, everything else kind of takes, you know, it gives you less resistance to grow. We're bullish on infrastructure. That's been long overdue and underloved. Nobody wants to drive on a bridge that doesn't work. And a lot of organizations or homeowners associations have their own sewer plant, and they don't have the money to fix it because they've added more houses. So they sell that to a third party who has the money, and then it's a bond to them. They're now just have they have a service that they charge for, and so we're seeing a lot more of that happening. Real estate still localized. There's some places where I wouldn't put it in money, and there's some places I wish I already had money there, and I'd want to put more money tomorrow. If that,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you, Fred. A lot of great points and a lot of topics that I would like to cover, but we only have so much time today. So we'll have to do a continuation of the show at some point later. So let's try to unpack some of them. So you mentioned Argentina and how it sets a precedence for the big US of A. Can you give our audience an example of two where you think uh, America can replicate Argentina's experience with ease?
Yeah, I think government institutions, not just government institutions, are self-protection to the like organizations typically grow as a system. Like that's just what they do. And
Mm.
so we're hundreds of years old as an organization. Whenever a government agency starts, it's never temporary. And so we have accumulated departments within agencies within departments that all have to justify their existence, and they typically justify existence with regulations. And there's that video of the president of Argentina just ripping post-it notes off the whiteboard of complete organizations going down. Very similar to what Elon did with Twitter. It works better now with 80-90%, whatever the number is, less people. And so there is a lot of fluff. There's a lot of like, if you and I ran our house or our business like the government did, we would have already been bankrupt decades ago.
Yeah.
And so the fact that we can't go bankrupt from can is very hard for a sovereign country with all the wealth that we have to go bankrupt. Doesn't mean we can't be really stupid with our money for a real long period of time and pay the consequences. And I think that's where we are now, is that as a country been really stupid for a really long time. And so if we can look at either right sizing or completely identifying whether or not this agency even exists, the federal government was set up to be almost like a structure around the rights of the individual states. The states had technically more rights than the federal government, and that changed 100 years ago. And it may never go back, but at least has to be fairer. Government should be localized, and so you're seeing a pushback to the states. And you're going to see states want to go one way and another state goes another way. And if you're in a state that doesn't think the way you want to think, move to a state that does think the way you want to think. And that was how this country was set up. And it blows my mind when people don't realize we're a constitutional republic. We're not a democracy. Because if we all vote to take your bike because we all outvoted you, you're going to take your bike. But the
Right.
Democratic, a republic, there's a catch there. There's people we vote to make those decisions, and they're probably not going to vote to take your bike, even if everyone wants to take your bike, because it's not just there. So we're seeing, and it's interesting to see, because they're ahead of us, because their election happened before us, they voted in their version of what Trump would be for us. And it's working beyond anyone's expectations of how fast it would work, how good it would work. I think they have no debt now. I think they're positive for the first time in years. They're current, like on every metrics that matters, it's financially better, and there's a lot less baggage around it. No one's getting insulted. No one's making artificial excuses. And I think unfortunately we're seeing everybody, and there's nothing wrong with it. Everyone wants to feel legitimate. And if you're not that special personally, but you want to be, you're going to make drama. And we're seeing that at a population level, not just an individual level. I'm going to be insulted by something you said just so I can feel like I'm right and you're wrong. And I think that just went too far. And I think people and so Argentina is a good litmus test of just, guy got voted in because he was going to he was going to make things smaller, and he did, and it's working. So the arguments against us doing it here are getting less and less as the days go by, which is great because we don't want to be first and be wrong. So it's nice to be second and know that it's right because it's already happened somewhere else.
And hopefully it will work out for
I
us
think
as
so.
well, for
Yeah.
sure. Agree with that. You touched upon that a little bit, and we know that our debt obligation is exponential. Do you think Trump administration has a chance on lowering our debt obligations, and if so, how do you anticipate them doing that?
I think they do. I think their plan, at least from what I've seen, is get energy costs down. The ripple effect is unimaginable. Like everything took energy. As a society grows, the amount of energy they need grows exponentially. So, if you're in a third world country, you're not going to have that many gadgets to plug in as a society. Whereas here, my kids have 17 gadgets. You probably, your kids, everyone has 17 gadgets. So energy is like the first part, and you just make it more available at a cheaper price. We have a huge reserve. We're the Saudi Arabia of of natural gas, and there's a huge demand overseas because they're buying liquid natural gas from Putin, the guy they're trying to also give sanctions to, but they can't sanction the natural gas because they need it. And so as he could just turn off the spigot and has. So if we get our energy numbers, if we get energy back flowing, lower price, more availability, so much so we can offset it and liquefy it so it can go in a tanker and sell natural gas overseas. We that's that right there. There'd be enough money to really use that to pay down the debt. Um, and when you do the math, if you give a business owner a tax break, he tends to employ more people. He tends to expand the business. And even if he didn't, if you get a tax break and you use it to buy a Corvette, you're
Mhm.
still, that dollar has now been multiplied. There's a leverage there where the people that bought the Corvette and the people that sold it to you and the dealership, like all that stuff happens. And in energy, that happens even more. If you're expanding energy in Pennsylvania, well, now more people are going to the diner on their break, and now more shipments of hamburgers from Cisco. And so all that stuff really impacts, that $1 of expanding the energy really impacts the local community and also the bigger community at large. That's where we were before COVID. Those things were already kind of running, and then COVID happened, change of leadership, and then pipelines get shut down, and so all that noise kind of distracted from energy. So I think their first, it's not the only answer, but I think if they can get energy back where it needs to be, I think the second thing they would do to free up assets to pay down the debt, because again, we have to free up the assets to pay down the debt versus borrowing more money, because that's just adding more debt. Um, by having less regulation, you have the ability to have businesses be more competitive in the global market. We still have a fairly high corporate tax rate. Let's get our corporate tax rate on par with overseas, and let's be more competitive overseas. If you're going to give me 1,000% tariff, I'm going to tariff yours. So there's some really neat things there. I think we're so used to income tax and all the taxes. That's fairly new from a country, our life of the country. Income tax was supposed to be temporary, and like I said, no temporary. The government's never done any new agency temporarily. There's no reason it can't either get slower down or simplified. A flat tax. Like there's some real cool ideas out there that literally work. Everybody would be open to it, except for the people benefiting from the way things are now. And the fun thing is, those people are being outvoted because there's more people that want things changed and keep it the same. And because there's more communication, whether it's X, whether it's social media, Facebook, where you're talking to your friends. It's definitely not on the TV yet. But there's more communication about this stuff going on than ever before. Where before we just believed what we saw because Walter Cronkite 60 years ago told us what he saw. And it probably, yeah, I wasn't around then. So all I can say is with technology, we're all hearing more things and not necessarily taking it all at face value, because there are AI videos, there are AI, fake deep fakes. So we see something, maybe, I don't know. I don't know if there's drones until I see one with my own eyes. And even then I might not believe it. It might just be a fake, whatever. So I think the knee-jerk reaction of they said it, so it must be true, no matter who they are, by the way. I'm not, I think that's really helped things kind of standardize. And those common sense practices aren't commonplace practices. And I think we're going to get back to that. And so energy, lower regulation, incentivize the right thing, which is a third part of it. A lot of the times, bad behavior, good behavior was not incentivized as much as bad behavior was accepted. And so those things I think are going away because people are like that. That's not going to work. Didn't work before, and let's get back to what used to work, or at least expand what we knew was going to work.
Yeah, thank you, Fred. Obviously, you're expecting a lot of positive changes, but as we know, any change, good or bad, usually takes time to implement, and this administration will be no different. They'll need some time to implement whatever changes they want. And Elon Musk is a good example when he came to X and started laying off people. I mean, the change was not overnight. Obviously, it was slow and steady, but we see the results now, and they're amazing. So we certainly expect pretty much the same or better results when he takes his new role on with Trump administration. But going back to 2025 and the investments, because we are, at the end of the day, we're investors community. So our investors typically would like to know is what kind of investments are going to be hot and trendy, if you will, or what should we see more of come 2025, knowing that the rates are probably not going to come down drastically as everyone expected. Yes, we saw a couple of drops in the last few months, but honestly, I don't anticipate them significantly dropping in the next year and a half. With that in mind, and knowing that you're the alternatives guy, what do you anticipate we'll see more of, or what would be some of the more popular investments in next year?
Yeah, so we're looking for safer trends. We're not going out on the limb yet. We still think there's a lot of corporate bloat. Obviously, your job is not guaranteed if you have a W-2 job, and as companies during this transition, there still could be layoffs, or could still be a slowdown.
Mhm.
Stocks are kind of still expensive, unless you're the Tesla, and even Tesla's expensive now because it's blown up because of AI. And so it's really frothy. So we are, from an alternative investment standpoint, we have about 50%. If someone, had in our flagship model, we have about 50% in traditional investments, but we try to do it, and that's stocks and bonds. I mean, that's traditional stuff. We try to do it in non-traditional ways. So getting back to value, I think value might not be this year, but it's coming up. So we're looking at moving towards value, where you're not buying the company because of future growth. You're buying that company because right now it's technically should be worth more than it is. That's been out of favor for a while. So I think that's coming back. There's funds out there that's their specialty. So we looked at the fund manager. We don't pick stocks. We pick the people who pick the stocks. So
Sure.
from an investing standpoint in that world, that's there. I think from an alternative investment, because banks really love to lend to people that don't need money. So there's a huge group of people and businesses that need money that need to go to a bank, and banks like, yeah, we're not really interested, or it's going to be much higher rate than you think is, the market. So private credit, private equity is an expanding exposure in our flagship. So we, again, using third parties. It all gets down to the underlying company underwriting. And what I'd look at from an investment standpoint is the consumer buying from the company something that is a must-have or a like to have? We are still a little bit gun shy, and we're staying with the have to have versus the like to have. There's an investment that we don't have in our flagship that is a phenomenal idea that is either 5 or 6 years too late or 2, 3 years too early. But if you've ever stayed at a Verbo, and this is, keep the name out of it, but the company saw the need in the market where Verbo rentals or Airbnb, this isn't a Verbo or Airbnb, it's nothing against them, but renting someone else's home, your experience between renting different homes from different people will be different experiences. And
Sure.
as a consumer, we want consistency. We want to go to a Ritz-Carlton and expect what a Ritz-Carlton does. So there's a company out there that specializes in buying Verbos, buying houses that could be Verbos or creating Verbos, but making every Verbo in their portfolio of hundreds of properties all be like a Ritz-Carlton. High thread count sheets, a concierge that you call with any issues, like that type of just, bottom line it. And so that's awesome. But in my world, that's a like to have. If I lose my job, the first thing we're going to do is cut the family vacation. either
Right.
cut it down or cut it off. So we're not putting new money in there because we're still thinking we're not ready for that. The economy's not there yet. There's a lot of repair that needs to be done. It's going to be ugly. Stocks might go down before they go up. AI is not going to work for everybody and every AI company, just like when technology like the transportation and automobile came out. I think there was like 3,000 automobile companies, and now there's Ford and GM, and Tesla and overseas, but just in North America there was maybe not 3,000, but at least 1,000 back there when the Model T was coming out. um
Yep.
I think AI is going to be the same thing, and they all cannot be winners. So where we're investing in AI personally is we're using it in the office to kind of do the admin stuff, the notes, the next steps, all the stuff that it's really good at. But we're using a firm that is providing a service for a niche for our family office. Um, and they're small enough that the people I call when the CEO answers the phone like that, I love. I don't know if they're
Right.
going to be here in 10 years. I hope they are because I'm kind of counting on them. But if not, I'll just pick a different one. So AI is going to be a great, but it's like everything else. You can't bet on one thing, or you bet on like the Teslas of the world or the people that are already doing something else, and AI is a natural next step for that company. IBM does it too with Watson's been around since ever. Apple obviously is trying to get into AI, and Apple's never first, but they're typically never bad. They'll get there. And so those things we're bullish on from an alternative investment standpoint. Some real estate is still good real estate. There's a huge mismatch of the amount of houses we need. And the amount of people that can afford it, and that's wrong. You used to be able to have one income as a family, and you'd have a single family house, and you'd have a car, and your wife was a stay-at-home wife, or your spouse was a stay-at-home spouse. Those days are gone, and it's going to take a while for that to come back. But where we're seeing some benefits is seeing the world the way it is. So there's a firm that we use that they do approachable housing, not affordable, and not the Saks Fifth Avenue 4,000 a month, one bedroom, 2 square feet apartment.
Right.
Approachable housing is smaller housing, but in a really nice package with a bar, rooftop bar and a fitness center, but it's just smaller. So that's one place that we see benefit of. And then the other part is for those apartment people who never wanted to have a house. Well, now they have a dog, they have kids, they've married, they need a house, but they still don't have enough for a down payment. Those build for rent communities, you can't buy them fast, you can't build them fast enough, which is really an interesting thing. It's just
Yep.
the next version of multifamily, but it's instead of being like this and being in a big building, it's kind of spread out, and everyone has a house and a lawn that they don't have to mow. And those are still in demand because they're more affordable.
They have been quite popular. I know a few individuals that are buying them and are doing really, really well as far as
Yeah.
they're concerned. So yeah,
And
completely.
there's funds that do that, and that's where we're getting the exposure.
Yeah, and you're making a lot of people happy by offering them housing that they need but can't afford otherwise. So yeah, that's definitely a huge benefit. Fred, so you mentioned private equity, which we'll know about, and then private credit. Can you give our audience an example of what do you mean by private credit as far as the investments go?
So most companies that are private find a difficulty if they're expanding, find a difficulty borrowing money. There's a friend of ours, we'll keep the name out of it, but he bought a resort that was, you know, out of bankruptcy
Mhm.
and had to self-fund with investors and not can't go to a bank, and turned it around. And then COVID happened, and he did even better in COVID because he had an outside venue and he was able to get big bands. And so the banks wouldn't give it to him in the beginning because it was out of bankruptcy and we didn't know if he could do his job. And then he knocks it out of the park financially, but it was during COVID, so the banks wouldn't give it to him because that was just during COVID. So 5 years later, now the banks will say, "Oh, maybe you do know what you're doing." Um, had there been private debt that person knew about or that was interested in investing in those types of that's really the niche. Is by the time the bank will say yes, you probably don't need them as much as when you originally need them. And so private credit private credit, private debt, it's all the same thing. It's
Mhm.
where firms, not banks, underwrite individual businesses, and they could be mortgage, they could just be business loans, but they're basically filling the gap of the bank saying, that stuff's too risky. We're not doing it. With, well, I still need the debt to grow and I got to borrow it somewhere. And it's cheaper to borrow one big check from one institution than
Sure.
1,000 small checks from 1,000 people. So it's more economically feasible for everyone to just have, as long as the rates are okay. Um, and so what typically happens, and what I've seen happen time and time again, the company has to give up equity to raise the money that they would have rather have borrowed and kept the equity for the current owners, or at least, the people that started it. So we're seeing a huge amount of people that are expanding or wanting to add AI or wanting to add something that's to the bottom line, but you need money to do that. Private
Mhm.
credit is coming into that, and typically it's secured, it's senior, it's floating rate. So if interest rates go up, the debt goes up. Interest rates go down, your cost goes down. So it's not a bond where you're locked in on both sides of the equation. But the neat thing with private credit and private debt, and again we'll use them interchangeably, is you're creating I'm loaning you directly to you, and so the loan documents will have covenants. You can't go out and get another loan. You can't do this. You can't do that. If you need more money, you have to show us even if you're private, you have to show us your numbers every quarter. So it's as safe as you can be during the underwriting, and even safer during the time in which you have my money if I lend it to you, because I'm senior, I'm secured. There's assets that you have that I can take back if you don't pay me. That's much different than just borrowing, lending you the money and hoping you pay me back. Um, so that's been, it's a little bit safer, I think, and it would always have been a great investment, except for banks are eating all of that debt. They were doing it all themselves. They were loving lending the money out. And that changed, 10, 12 years ago, started to change. And now it's today, you'll see even, it's even today, I'll see a 5-year CD less money than the 3-year CD, because the banks just don't want your money that long. They want to have, I just think that's funny. And the fact they still advertise the 5-year CD at a lower rate most times than a 4 or 3, like, you're wasting your time. Like, no one's going to buy that. And I know people that run, that are run at work at the bank. Like, we still have people buying it. I'm like, all right, you know what? You can't fix stupid sometimes. It is what it is. Um, so senior secured, collateralized, we'll eat that up as long as it's the right underwriter, and they have track record for underwriting it. Will someone borrow and not pay back? Absolutely. That's why you have a portfolio. That's why you make it secure. That's why you put the covenants in. And all those things kind of stack up, because if they borrow money today and you made it easier on them and they paid well, they need it again in 2 years, they go right back. And so there's a lot of what I'll call wheelhouse money. And so if you can create a value add to a consumer, whether it's business or person, that they'll come back. It's always easier to sell again to the same customer than try to get a new customer. So those economies of scale all come back to the bottom line of whoever's doing it.
Makes sense. The way you're describing it, if I were to look at it from a real estate standpoint, it sounds kind of similar to bridge loans, where they take higher priority over the other loans, if the borrower is borrowing from other agencies, but bridge is
Exactly.
always on top of it. So yeah, makes sense. Fred, thank you. This has been amazing. As we're nearing the end of our interview, we always like to ask our audience two personal questions. The first one is how our community can find you. What is the best way to find you?
So checking out our website is CCWMG, Cat William Mary Greg. For your listeners, we have a complimentary SOS, which is a second opinion service, no cost, no obligation. If it makes sense, we'll talk to one of our advisors, and then we'll send a questionnaire. We'll be able to do analysis for any of your listeners, and we have software that I love. If you're in the market, the software will say, here's the best 6 months and the worst 6 months of the stuff you're already in. We'll do the report and we'll give you we'll do the analysis and we'll give you the report. You don't have to fix it with us. If you see an outlier, you can just do it yourself. If you're a self trader, which a lot of your are both of our, in our circles, fine.
Yep.
We'll just say, here's your risk. And by the way, did you know? So that's something we'll give. So you can get that through the start of conversation. I think the second thing, especially for the alternative investments, if you go to Forbes.com and put in my last name, it's free to you. I am a paid contributor by Forbes, but you don't have to pay to I think you get 5 free a month or something. Put in my last name and subscribe to my articles. Every article is about an alternative investment strategy I don't talk about the investments. I'm not here to sell the investments. I'm here to explain all the things out there. That quick service restaurant is in there. I did do an article about Taylor Swift, so there's no product behind that other than I did not have to stretch to figure out that Taylor Swift management and her career is almost like an alternative way to, like, everything she's done has been better and different and an alternative to the way most people, most entertainers handle their career. So I did the article for my 13-year-old daughter thinking I'd have to like really stretch, and I didn't have to stretch. Like, I did some research and I was amazed by her and her people, or the combo of the two. And I know my wife and my daughter's way into her. I see it on TV, but I didn't know. But there's Easter eggs. Like, there's so much stuff that's going on and it's well thought out, which good alternative investments are also well thought out, because it's a whole building it, doing whatever you're doing, and then the exit. In all alternative investments, the exit is landing the plane is where most accidents happen. So landing the alternative investment, going that full cycle, you need to make sure that there's a great path to land safely, or you don't get on the plane at all. So I think the Forbes.com article and also our website would be the best ways to reach out to us, learn more, and then they're both, they're both free.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Fred.
Thank you for having me.
It's particularly timely in the time of Thanksgiving and of Christmas coming up. So
Yeah,
those are amazing gifts, and our community greatly appreciates
great.
them.
Merry
And
Christmas. Happy holidays. Thank you for having me.
thank you. And our last question, wait, you're not done
Uh-oh.
yet.
Uh-oh.
Last question, we always like to ask, how do you like to give back? And I know you do that a lot, so feel free to
Sure.
share.
So I ran for 7 years. I ran a food pantry that was already running, and I 10x'd it. We went from 2,400 square feet to 24,000 square feet. Um,
Wow,
got a
impressive.
new building, and in 18 months paid off the debt. So I think now it's enabling my team to have the time, and I'll pay them for the time to go out there and help. Our SOS doesn't have an income requirement, so there are people that don't have a ton of money but have a ton of questions. We can help them, high level in the SOS. We do a lot of local to us at the library. We'll give free, seminars, these things. If I don't get any business from this, that's fine by me, because I'll be here again. Life's a contact sport. So we believe that you treat the CEO and the janitor the same. You treat them both well,
Absolutely.
and you get what you put out there. So as long as you're putting out there authenticity, and you want to help, people get that, and people wonder, oh, that's new. No one ever does that before. So giving back is a big thing, and I think we all have to do it our own way. For me, I didn't think anyone should be hungry, especially in Chester County, Pennsylvania, where I'm at. And we do a lot we have a foundation. So my kids, both my son and my daughter, have to give me a proposal on where they want to give money. I didn't know Mr. Beast had a philanthropic arm. And I'm like, there's no way, buddy, I'm giving money to Mr. Beast. And my son sent me the link. I'm like, oh my God, this guy's doing real philanthropic 501(c)(3 legitimate things. So we did that. And I think my daughter picked something that like saves the turtles or whatever. So, I knew that was legitimate, and if it's important to her. So enabling our kids, I think, is also, I think our kids, we need to teach them that not everyone's as lucky, and we're more lucky than skillful. Like there's probably a quantum world where I'm who I am and did what I did, but at the wrong time, and didn't end up in Forbes, didn't end up in 30 states like we are. So I'm fortunate, and I know it's well deserved, but I also know I have to earn it every day. And so you earn it every day by helping everybody.
And you've been earning it for over a decade at this point,
Thank
and
you. I've been paying, whether it's been earned or not. I've been paying paying the piper.
yeah, for sure. Fred,
Well,
again,
thank you
thank you
again for
so
having
much.
me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this was amazing. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.